Good morning and welcome to St. Anne's Episcopal Church, right in the heart of downtown Lowell. We actually happen to be also in the heart of the first urban national park in the United States, and you happen to be visiting now with me the oldest church in all of Lowell. In fact, in 1824, when this church was built, this wasn't even Lowell, it was East Chelmsford. So I'm hoping that in the next half hour or so, you'll have an opportunity to look at some of the rich heritage of this church, its history, and I am the pastor here, and I know that priests are not supposed to be cheating, but I'm going to have a little bit of a cheat sheet here so that I can share with you as much information as possible. There's so much to see and to learn and to admire about this beautiful church. So would you please walk in with me as we make our way into St. Anne's Episcopal Church. We're walking now into what is called traditionally in the Episcopal Church the narthex, which amounts to the vestibule. And in here you see a number of things. There's an article about St. Anne's that recently appeared in the Lowell Sun. There's also a banner here in Spanish that talks about the fact that we are a Spanish-speaking ministry of the Episcopal Church. We have services in Spanish as well as in English. The traditional banner also depicting the name of our church. And Episcopal churches have a tendency to be either low or high or middle of the road. This is probably more of a middle of the road in terms of the two ends, namely Protestantism and Catholicism. And one of the things that would distinguish us as kind of an Episcopal, but kind of in the Catholic tradition church, is the fact that we've got here in the vestibule also two holy water fountains that were donated several years ago in memory of the husband of the parish administrator, a lady by the name of Muriel Moget. So, and a reminder, and I know a lot of people don't understand the function of a baptismal font, or not a holy water font, excuse me, but it's a reminder actually of our baptism. And so when people come into the church, they would dip their fingers on the holy water and make the sign of the cross as a reminder of the cross with which they were signed at the time of their baptism. So we're now walking into the main sanctuary of the church, and we're going to make our way around the perimeter of the church so that you get a chance to see not necessarily in the order in which they were constructed and built, but nonetheless in the order in which they are arranged, the great variety of the stained glass windows that this beautiful church has. I'm standing here now in front of the window attributed to Tiffany, which is one of 6 windows that we have here made by their company. This is the window of St. Peter's, so designated because he's holding a set of keys on his left hand. Remember that Peter was told by Jesus, "You're a Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and I will hand you the keys of the kingdom." As I said, this is one of 6 Tiffany windows that we have. The next one here is a window depicting the apostle and the evangelist, actually St. Luke. You see him, he's holding a tablet. He's also referred to as a physician. So maybe the tablet that he's holding in his hand is not only a symbol of the gospel he wrote, maybe he was also writing a prescription at the time, who knows? But nonetheless, a window, not a Tiffany window, but a window attributed to or designed to represent the evangelist Luke. Now, as we move, and I told you that I was going to be relying on some notes here, we're going to be moving to some of these pews. A lot of these pews until the 1960s were actually rented by families who would occupy them. And so as you go through the church, you'll see that some pews were actually occupied by larger families, and so they're not in the middle. Some of them have distinct things that actually were put in there to provide for the needs of the family. Some of them even have individually made hat racks for the people who came and had some place to put their racks. But all of them at one time were occupied. And in fact, when this church was built in 1824, it was built by Kirk Boot and the Merrimack Manufacturing Company to provide here in the United States a place of worship for a lot of the people, and particularly the English girls that were coming to work in the mills. So you're looking, when you come to St. Anne's, at the best example of English architecture this side of the Atlantic. And as I said, until the 1960s, these pews were actually rented. Families paid pew rent, and the girls who worked in the mills were actually deducted a very small amount of money from their checks that actually came to the church as part of their pew rental. Pew number 104, which is this one right back here, was actually rented by Kirkwood and his family. This was a pew in which they actually sat, a large family, and they occupied this place. Now, you've also got to remember that the church as we have it now was not as long as the church originally was built. The church was originally built much shorter than it is. It came probably to where this marker is right now, so that if people were sitting here, they were actually sitting pretty close to the altar and pretty close to the east wall of the church. If you look at the pews that are against that backdrop are actually a little bit higher, because those were the pews where the wardens and the vestry people, the vestry men, back in those days, vestries were composed only of men. Now we've got obviously women as well as men in the composition of the vestry, but that's where the vestry men and the wardens sat a little bit higher so that they could get a good glimpse of the church membership and what was going on. As we move on, now here is this window, which is very, very interesting. It's the window of the birth of Christ. And the interesting thing about this window is that unlike the other windows, it is not stained glass, but is actually painted glass. The other ones are actually stained glass, which means that the color is actually incorporated into the fabric of the glass. In this particular instance, the glass is actually painted instead of having the color incorporated into the actual makeup of the glass itself. And then on this right-hand side, the last window is the window of the Annunciation, where the Archangel Gabriel appears to Mary and tells Mary a message from God that she has been chosen to be the mother of the Messiah. And again, a beautiful window. In this particular case, is actually stained glass as opposed to painted glass in the previous window that I mentioned. And up there you have the word Abba, which in Aramaic means Father, right at the center of that four-pointed star, which of course gives us the heritage from where we come, which is actually the Jewish heritage, Jesus himself being not only the Son of God, but the son of Mary and Joseph, both of them Jewish citizens. The baptismal font was constructed of hand-carved stone with a mahogany cover, and this cover is removed, and of course inside there is a well where the baptismal water goes. It was purchased in England with money donated by the young ladies of the parish, and it was procured in 1852 by the Bishop of Fredericton and brought to St. Anne's for a total cost of $50. The effigy back here, right next to the window and behind the baptismal font, is that of Father Theodore Edson. Theodore Edson in 1925 was actually ordained to the priesthood in this church, and then the church became at the time part of one of the churches of the Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts. Theodore Edson was a great man. He was a rector here, or a pastor here, for 60 years. He was close to 90 when he died. Edson Cemetery is named after him. He and his wife and daughter are buried there. And the rectory where I presently live was actually also occupied. It was built a year later in 1825, where Theodore Edson, his wife, and their daughter Elizabeth lived. Theodore Edson was just one of those great men who was not only